In part 3, we look more deeply at Jonathan Shea's ideas on moral injury. Once we take Gilligan's observations of violated values in childhood development into account, the spectrum of trauma broadens widely to include a range of experiences that many writers will recognise as what is commonly called the wound. A callback to that classic of literary criticism, Aristotle's Poetics, the original Greek term for this, hamartia, was apparently confused by later interpreters, but in so doing came to be known as the fatal flaw of the tragic protagonist. Shea himself refers to such a narcissistic wound involved with moral injury. He relates this to another Greek term, thumos, which he indicates is close to our modern-day conception of narcissism. Shea goes on to categorize one of the thumotic emotions of rage, two others being elated pride and crushing shame, as triggered by the awareness that, quote, my ideals, ambitions and attachments have been very quickly and disastrously deteriorated, and what's more, it's that person who is responsible for that deterioration. While it's difficult to indicate that Daniel Salazar's actions are motivated by Shea's form of thumotic killer rage, I think this definitely applies to other plot lines in the Walking Dead narrative world, and especially the confrontations Rick repeats with lead antagonists from the new communities they discover on their journey. Carol Gilligan's inclusion of character inauthenticity as the central site of trauma fits surprisingly well with another popular focus of character arcs, that of the false self or mask that the protagonist wears. While the false self is apt for a discussion of narcissism, we had in use the practice of writing protagonists who maintain such a lie right back to Henrik Ibsen and earlier. What Ibsen called the life lie is a mask of idealism to protect us from the harsh realities of our existence. Some examples would be Ibsen's The Wild Duck, Eugene O'Neill's The Iceman Cometh, and Arthur Miller's All My Sons. For me, I see this issue in a number of contemporary twist movies, something I will return to in my later look at trauma narratives and film. Gilligan herself lists a number of fictional female characters in literature who she sees as exploring the inauthentic life lie. The earliest being Iphigenia in Euripides' drama Iphigenia in Tauris, then the eponymous heroine of Jane Eyre, Scout in To Kill a Mockingbird, Frankie in The Member of the Wedding, Rahel in The God of Small Things, Claudia in The Bluest Eye, and Tambu in Nervous Conditions. So, we have some background on living the life lie and exposing it, but where does this place Daniel Salazar? It's easy to see why a character such as Salazar, having previously been a member of an El Salvadorian death squad, would seek out a new identity with his migration to the USA. The officer became a barber. The line delivered by Daniel to Efrain in episode 4 of season 3 is actually a much more complex statement than it at first appears, conveying two very different selves. More recently, screenwriting guru Michael Hay has pushed this idea of a persona, the word itself originally meaning literally mask, and uses this concept centrally in his screenwriting seminars. Appropriately for our focus on Daniel Salazar and his previous self within the death squad Sombra Negra, translated as Black Shadow, Haig's interest in Jungian persona draws many threads of trauma narrative together with the persona's counterpart, the shadow. Whereas the persona is the positive mask, or for our purposes Salazar's barber persona, used to shield ourselves from darkness, Jung's shadow aspect is everything we reject in ourselves, what we could say is Salazar's murderous death squad officer identity. Hamartia, shadow, or in screenwriting, your protagonist's ghost, the aspect of the protagonist's backstory that haunts him or her, are all convergent ideas that can be informed by a look at moral injury. K.M. Wayland, author of Creating Character Arcs, believes that the life lie relates directly to, and in fact can be explained by, the ghost. She claims the arc is itself proportionate to the ghost, which is proportionate to the lie. And Daniel Salazar's arc in this episode is impressive, as is his ghost. But what is his lie? My own research traces the way that we both construct the lie and yet put in a huge amount of cognitive effort into ignoring, or in technical terms avoiding, both the truth behind the lie and the pain central to its construction. I will argue that Daniel's pain is linked to his own moral injury, first suffered in El Salvador, and this injury is what caused him to be split between the officer and the barber persona. Daniel Salazar hid his old El Salvadorian identity from his daughter Ophelia because he believed that the old self was not worthy of his daughter's love. His confession to Ephraim is essentially a narration of these two selves, the officer and the barber, in collision. In further parts of this series I will break down Fear's episode 100 and bring the idea of moral injury together with the episode's religious allegory and various points of intentional mirroring and inversion.